Why do you think this book is so important for psychologists?
Psychologists? Well, there are many people today who have no connection to any organized religion. They've lost faith in their original Christianity or whatever was the religious tradition of their childhood. But they still have a very personal sense of the sacred, but they have no means of expressing it. One of the reasons that Jung's approach to spirituality and religion is important is that it offers people an approach to spirituality that's not based on any existing doctrine or dogma or any existing religious tradition. It's purely based on personal contact with the transpersonal psyche, with the objective level of consciousness. And so it's very helpful for people who would like to have a personal spirituality, but they don't belong to a church. And many people like that nowadays come into psychotherapy. There are many people in psychotherapy who are looking for some kind of spiritual practice, but they can't find it in the churches. And sometimes they have questions about suffering or about the meaning of their life or problems of evil and so on, and they can't find any answers in traditional religion. But using the medium of depth psychology, they can find some responses to this kind of existential question. That's why I think the book is useful.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that book will be not just useful for Jungians, but it's going to be more and more useful for Freudists, for psychoanalysts, because they are who really denied this spiritual connection between.
Yeah, I understand. Well, for many years in the Freudian tradition, you were not allowed to talk about religion or spirituality because Freud regarded it as an illusion. But I would say in the last 20 years, there's been an increase of interest among the Freudian tradition in spirituality and religion. And I think actually this kind of work might offer a bridge between the two fields, because the break between Freud and Jung, I think, was a real tragedy for the field. And if we could find some way of bridging between the fields, I think it would have a healing effect. And since the Freudians are now becoming interested, and even mainstream psychology, I don't know what's happening in Russia, but in this country, even mainstream psychologists who are not analysts of any kind are becoming interested, because people are realizing that spirituality is very important for people's health, for their mental health and their physical health. So this would be important to all schools of psychology, actually. For a long time, when people in psychotherapy would bring up religious questions, the analyst or the psychotherapist would say nothing, because and just wait for the person to talk about something else, because they felt that this was not appropriate for psychotherapy. They felt this should be addressed to a priest or a minister of religion or something like that. But nowadays, because of the decline of the influence of traditional religions, the psychotherapists and analysts have become analogous to spiritual directors in the traditions. They are helping people to find answers to questions of meaning and purpose in their lives, which used to be done by the churches, but now is essentially being done by psychotherapists. It's the only place people go nowadays for these kind of answers. You can either go to philosophy or to psychology.
So which approaches are used in this spiritual practice, and if there are any other practices combined and like sort of integrated?
In my own practice, I don't use any of the traditional spiritual practices like prayer or meditation. I think that's the kind of instruction that people can get those somewhere else. What I ask people to do is pay attention to their dreams, to synchronistic events, and to their inner life, to their complexes, to their neuroses. Because by paying attention to those kind of emotional difficulties, and especially to dreams, one can have direct contact with the objective psyche, with the transpersonal level of consciousness. And one can have religious experiences if one pays attention to those kind of experiences. Those experiences are known as numinous experiences. This is a word that Jung borrowed from the German theologian Rudolf Otto, who wrote a book in 1917 called The Holy, or I don't know what the Russian translation is. In English it's translated as the idea of the holy. It was called Das Heilige in German. And in that book, Otto talks about a certain quality, what it feels like to have contact with the sacred dimension, or the holy. And he says it's an experience of mystery, it's a tremendously powerful experience of fascination and mystery, and something other than one's ordinary experience, an experience of awe, or dread, or mystery. And when Jung was giving his Terry lectures in about 1937 or so, he borrowed this term from Otto's writing to talk about certain experiences that he was hearing in his consulting room. And what he realized, and what we're also realizing, is that people have numinous experiences, experiences of the sacred or the holy, which don't correspond to traditional Judeo-Christian experiences of the sacred or the holy. They're individual experiences of the self, the transpersonal self, which have this numinous or religious quality about them. And what we find is that these experiences have a healing effect. They have a very beneficial effect on a person's psychology, which is why Jung thought that his real approach to psychotherapy was to encourage people to pay attention to these kind of experiences. That's the tradition that we're working in now.
Why do you have such interest to a Russian audience?
Oh, to a Russian audience?
Yeah.
Well, I imagine that there are many people in Russia who are also no longer members of the established church, and yet they would like to have some kind of spiritual practice or some kind of spirituality. And this is important because it teaches you how to do that without belonging to any church. All you have to do is pay attention to your dreams and individual experiences. So it's very useful. Well, I look forward. I'm very pleased that this is of interest to Russian-speaking people, and I look forward to meeting you in person. And I hope this approach will be of value to you.